Hello, I'm here today with my wrap-up of comics that I read in February. I'm just going to hop into it. They're in no particular order because I didn't feel like doing that. Too bad. So, I read The Imaginaries, issues 1 to 4. That's the complete run. Unfortunately, this is about where imaginary kids go when their kids no longer need them. We follow G-Man, who's a superhero who is recruited to fight against the tyrannical ruler of the Imaginaries land. And it sucks that it didn't continue beyond these 4 issues because we didn't get the confrontation. We got the cliffhanger leading up to the confrontation, but it didn't continue beyond that, and it was kind of disappointing because it was a good premise that I was interested in. I also read Kid Eternity, the deluxe edition by Grant Morrison. This was a messed up comic. I was very confused for the first few issues, but it was a lot of fun, actually. It's about this kind of non-corporeal superhero who believes he has to help the gods of chaos to stabilize the world, and he buddies up with a stand-up comic who may or may not be in the process of dying. Sounds whack, it is, but the art is fantastic and the story is interesting. Then I read the first volume of Techno Priests. It's called Techno Preschool. This is about the son of a priestess who was raped and gave birth to triplets, and she rejected 2 of them because they looked nothing like her, and then she started a corrupt corporation making cheese using her 2 rejected children as slaves, until the son eventually convinces his mother that he should go to the techno school to become an ultimate gamer programmer thing. And it was quite interesting. I feel like the family story is more interesting than like the whole technical side of things. That felt like it wasn't really completely fleshed out. But maybe that will be fleshed out more in further volumes, and I will be continuing with this series. Then I read Albion issues 1 to 6, which is the complete run. And this takes the comic superheroes of the UK in the 60s and 70s and the supervillains as well, and posits this idea that what if they were real and they're all being kept in a prison? And that's basically the premise of Albion. It's quite interesting to see how the British classic superheroes and villains are compared to the American classics, and I'd actually like to seek out more of the British classic comics because their superheroes and supervillains seem really weird. Yeah, it's really intriguing to me. And then I read Batman War on Crime, and I guess if I had to pick a favorite of this month, this would be it. It's a really nuanced look at how crimes, gangs, violence happen in a low economic areas and how the wealthy can create these situations, for example by removing viable work options, and then take advantage of them through things like gentrification. The art is super detailed, realistic, and Alex Ross is now one of my go-to comic artists at this point. I'm interested to seek out more of his work, and the story too, as I said, it's very nuanced and very cool. Then I read the first issue of The Freeze, and the premise of this is that the whole world is frozen except for Ray and the people that he literally goes and touches. It's very much an introduction issue. Nothing is really explained. They're just kind of discovering what impact this has on the world. So I am interested to see where it goes in further issues. Then I read Generations, and I know I said War on Crime would be my favorite, but Generations is probably right up there. It's a tie. War on Crime and Generations are my favorite this month. This is such a touching story. Mateo is our main character. He runs away from everything. He ran away from his father after coming out to him. He ran away from his boyfriend, and now he is living with his grandma, his 3 aunts, and his pregnant cousin. And this is just a super sweet and very poignant story. has a lot of commentary on becoming an adult. I read the first issue of New Way. This is like MMA meets Robo Wars. It's set in a world divided along socioeconomic lines as well, so it deals with both, poverty and with this whole fighting thing going on. The colors in this are great, and I will continue reading the series. I also read the first issue of Self-Made. I thought I was reading the wrong comic when I first read this because it is a fantasy story. And that I felt didn't fit with the kind of science fiction futuristic cover that was on it. And then it finally clicked what the story was, and it immediately sparked my interest to pick up other issues in this. I'm excited to see where it goes. I also read Captain Stoneheart and the Truth Fairy. This is an interesting story about a greedy, evil ship captain who's in the shape of a hippopotamus. He meets a fairy who kind of teaches him about being good. To be honest, I think there's too many words crammed on the page, that I found it was really distracting from the art, and it wasn't a lot of dialogue like you see in comics. Usually it's like a children's story almost, and I think that would have been better if it was spread out over more pages. So it has the potential to be better if it was kind of edited differently. Then I read the second issue of The Lollipop Kids, and the premise of this is that when immigrants came over to America, they brought more than just, their luggage. They also brought over different creatures from their fables, their legends, their myths. And it is the responsibility of their children to keep these creatures in check. I don't know if I'll be continuing on with this series because it feels like it's kind of very slow moving at this point. But I may give it another issue before I decide to stop. Then I read the first issue of Man-Eaters, and this has another interesting premise. It's what if the onset of puberty in girls also came with the chance that they could transform into vicious wildcats and attack people? It's such an interesting premise that I hope it doesn't fall into YA tropes, because it feels like it could. But I really hope it doesn't. So I will be continuing on with this. Then I read volume 3 of Unwritten. It's called Dead Man's Knock. This is the third volume in the series about a man named Tom, who is the inspiration for his father's Harry Potter-esque fantasy series. Or is he literally the main character from the series, plucked from the pages? We're still trying to figure things out there. There's a lot of intrigue in this volume, and we get introduced to the Cabal that's fighting against Tom and his friends, and I'm definitely enjoying this series and will definitely continue on. I also read issues 1 to 9 of Wildcats version 3.0. There's 20 issues in total. I just didn't finish them by the time February ended, so I still am currently reading the series. This is an interesting story. It's about a corporation founded by superheroes, trying to integrate itself into every aspect of life. And it's interesting because this comic is from 2003. So it's kind of prophetic in a way, as we see many corporations nowadays maybe taking cues from this comic of how to become more well-known brands. Those are the comics that I read in February. Let me know if you've read any of these and what you thought of them. And if you have any recommendations for comics, I'm always looking for more recommendations. That would be very welcome. And thank you for watching.